I thought I knew what loneliness felt like until I walked into my own home on Christmas Eve and realized my family had left me behind like yesterday's trash. My name is Barbara. I'm 63 years old, and I've spent the last 40 years of my life building a family I thought would never abandon me. But standing in my dark, silent living room that night, with snow falling outside and not a single light on to welcome me home, I learned something cruel about the people you love most. They can disappear without warning, and they won't even feel guilty about it. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world right now, drop a comment and tell me where you are. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, you'll understand every word I'm about to say. Make sure to check the description box below for more stories like this, because what happened to me could happen to anyone. I'd been visiting my sister in North Dakota for 3 days. She'd had hip surgery, and someone needed to be there. My son, Trevor, told me to go, that everything would be fine at home, that they'd see me on Christmas Eve for our traditional dinner. I believed him. I always believed him. That was my first mistake. The driveway was empty when I pulled up. No cars. No lights in the windows. Just the glow of the street lamp reflecting off the icicles hanging from the gutters. I remember feeling my stomach drop as I turned off the engine. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones the way you feel a storm coming. I grabbed my suitcase and walked up to the front door, my breath fogging in the cold air. The spare key was still under the mat where I'd left it. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, and that's when the silence hit me like a fist to the chest. No music. No laughter. No smell of roasting turkey or cinnamon candles. Just darkness and the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I flipped on the light in the entryway and called out, "Trevor? Melissa? Anyone home?" Nothing. I walked through the house, turning on lights as I went, my heart pounding harder with every empty room. The living room was spotless, like no one had been there in days. The kitchen counter was bare except for a single coffee mug in the sink. Their bedroom upstairs was made, the closets half empty. Suitcases gone. They were gone. And then I saw him. Standing by the fireplace in the den, his back to me, was an old man I'd never seen before in my life. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with a shock of white hair that looked like it hadn't been combed in weeks. He wore a thick cardigan sweater and wool slippers, and he didn't move when I walked in. He just stood there, staring at the flames flickering in the fireplace. I froze in the doorway, my hand still on the light switch. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at the fire, his shoulders slightly hunched, his hands clasped behind his back. And then, slowly, he turned his head and looked at me over his shoulder. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, and they seemed to see right through me. "You must be Barbara," he said quietly. His voice was raspy, like sandpaper on wood. "Yes," I said, taking a step back. "And who the hell are you?" Before he could answer, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands and saw a text message from Trevor. *Mom, sorry for the last-minute change. Emergency trip to Hawaii. Melissa's work thing. We'll be back next week. Watch Grandpa for us. He's harmless. Merry Christmas. I read it 3 times, my hands trembling. Emergency trip. Hawaii. Watch Grandpa. I looked up at the old man, who had turned back to the fire, his expression unreadable. "You're Melissa's grandfather?" I asked, my voice cracking. He nodded once, slowly. "And they just left you here? With me?" Another nod. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I stood there, staring at this stranger in my house, feeling the hot sting of tears behind my eyes. If you've ever been treated like you don't matter by the people who are supposed to love you, you know exactly what I felt in that moment. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper. Something that felt like grief. I took a breath and walked over to the couch, dropping my suitcase on the floor. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "What's your name?" He turned to face me fully this time, his pale eyes locking onto mine. "Raymond," he said. "But you can call me Ray." "Okay, Ray," I said, crossing my arms. Why don't you tell me why my son and his wife thought it was a good idea to leave you here with me on Christmas Eve without so much as a phone call?" He was quiet for a long moment, and then he smiled, a thin, sad smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Because," he said softly, "they didn't want me telling you the truth." My blood ran cold. "What truth?" I whispered. He took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "The truth about who Melissa really is," he said. "And what she's been doing to your son." I should have walked away. I should have called Trevor right then and demanded answers. But I didn't. Because deep down, I'd always known something was off about Melissa. And now, standing in my dark, empty house with this strange old man on Christmas Eve, I was finally going to find out what. Ray turned back to the fire, his voice barely above a whisper. "You ready to learn the truth?" I swallowed hard and nodded. And that was the moment everything I thought I knew about my family started to unravel. I didn't sleep that night. Ray told me to sit down, so I did. He poured me a glass of brandy from a bottle I didn't know we had, and he sat across from me in Trevor's reading chair, his hands folded in his lap like he was about to deliver a sermon. "Where do I even start?" he said, more to himself than to me. "Start with why they left you here," I said, gripping the glass so hard I thought it might shatter. He nodded slowly. "Melissa didn't want me on that trip because she knew I'd tell you everything. She's been planning this for months, convincing Trevor to go, making sure you'd be out of town, making sure I'd be the one left behind to keep quiet. But she underestimated me." "Underestimated you how?" Ray leaned forward, his pale eyes sharp and focused. "I'm dying, Barbara. Cancer. Stage 4. I've got maybe 6 months left, if I'm lucky. And when you're staring down the barrel like that, you stop caring about keeping secrets. Especially when those secrets are destroying good people." My throat tightened. "What secrets?" He took a breath. "Melissa isn't who she says she is. Her real name is Melissa Ann Whitmore, and she's been married 3 times before Trevor. Each time, she bled those men dry, emotionally, financially, and then she disappeared. Restraining orders. Fraud accusations. One of her exes tried to kill himself because of what she put him through." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "That's not possible." Trevor vetted her. They dated for 2 years before they got married. He would have known. "She's good," Ray interrupted. "She knows how to play the long game. She changed her name, moved states, reinvented herself. Trevor didn't stand a chance." "And you know all this because?" "Because I'm not really her grandfather," he said quietly. I blinked. "What?" Ray sighed and rubbed his face with both hands. "I'm a private investigator. Was, anyway, before the cancer. Melissa's second husband hired me 5 years ago to track her down after she emptied his bank accounts and vanished. I found her in Oregon, but by the time I got there, she was already gone again. I've been following her trail ever since." My hands were shaking. "So you're telling me my son is married to a con artist, and you've been living in my house pretending to be her grandfather too? What? Gather evidence?" "Something like that," he said. "I needed to get close enough to prove what she was doing. But then I got sick, and everything got complicated. I contacted Melissa a few months ago and told her I knew who she was. I thought she'd run. Instead, she invited me to stay with her and Trevor, said she'd take care of me in my final days. I didn't understand why until I got here." "Why?" I whispered. "Because she's setting him up," Ray said, his voice hard. "She's been slowly transferring money out of their joint accounts, forging documents, making it look like Trevor's the one stealing. When she's ready, she'll divorce him, take everything, and leave him holding the bag. And he won't even see it coming because he's so in love with her he can't see straight." I felt like the room was spinning. "Why didn't you tell him? Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," Ray said. "But she's smart. She monitors his phone, his email, everything. And she knew if I told you, you'd confront Trevor, and he'd tell her, and she'd disappear before I could prove anything. So I waited. I gathered evidence. Bank statements, phone records, emails to her old associates. I've got it all." "Where?" I demanded. He reached into his cardigan pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. Right here. I stared at the tiny piece of plastic like it was a live grenade. Why are you giving this to me? I asked. Because I'm not going to live long enough to see this through, Ray said. But you are. You're his mother. You can save him. I took the USB drive with trembling hands. It was warm from being in his pocket. There's something else you need to know, Ray said, and his voice dropped even lower. Melissa's pregnant. My heart stopped. What? She told Trevor 2 weeks ago. He's over the moon. But I don't think the baby's his. I couldn't breathe. Why would you say that? Because I saw her with someone else, Ray said. A man. They met at a hotel in Seattle 3 months ago. I followed them. I have photos. He pulled out his phone and showed me. There she was, Melissa, my son's wife, smiling and laughing with a man I didn't recognize. In another photo, they were kissing in a parking garage. I thought I was going to be sick. She's using the baby to lock Trevor in, Ray said. Once she has full access to everything, she'll take it all and disappear. And Trevor will be left with nothing. No money, no wife, no child. Just debt and a broken heart. I couldn't stop the tears. They poured down my face, hot and angry and full of grief for my son, for the life he thought he was building, for the family that was about to be ripped apart. And then Ray said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. You have 3 days before they come back, he said. 3 days to decide what you're going to do with that information. And I'll tell you right now, Barbara, whatever you choose, it's going to destroy someone. The only question is who. If you're still watching, leave a comment and let me know. Would you tell your child the truth, even if it meant breaking their heart? And don't forget to check the description box for more stories like mine, because this is only the beginning. I spent the next 3 days in hell. Ray and I moved through the house like ghosts, barely speaking, the weight of what he'd told me pressing down on both of us like a physical thing. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Melissa's face, heard her laugh, remembered all the times she'd called me mom and hugged me like she meant it. How could I have been so blind? On the first day, I went through the USB drive Ray had given me. It was worse than I'd imagined. Spreadsheets showing money transfers. Emails to a man named David, love letters, plans to meet, discussions about getting rid of the dead weight. Photos of her with other men. Documents showing she'd opened credit cards in Trevor's name without his knowledge. My son was being destroyed piece by piece, and he had no idea. I called my sister that night, sobbing so hard I could barely get the words out. She told me to go to the police, to show them everything. But Ray had already explained why that wouldn't work. Melissa was too careful, too calculated. She'd covered her tracks legally. Without Trevor's cooperation, there was nothing law enforcement could do. And if I went to Trevor with this, he'd defend her. He'd think I was jealous, controlling, trying to ruin his marriage. I knew my son. He wouldn't believe me. Not without irrefutable proof. And by the time he saw the truth for himself, it would be too late. On the second day, I started planning. If the police couldn't help, and Trevor wouldn't listen, then I had to take matters into my own hands. I had to find a way to expose Melissa in a way that couldn't be denied, couldn't be explained away. I needed her to confess, or I needed her to slip up so badly that even Trevor couldn't ignore it. Ray and I sat at the kitchen table that afternoon, the winter sun streaming through the windows, and we plotted like criminals. She's coming back in 2 days, Ray said. And when she does, she's going to try to get rid of me. She knows I'm a threat. How? I asked. She'll probably try to send me to a nursing home, or convince Trevor I'm losing my mind and need professional care. She's done it before. Isolated people who could expose her, made them look crazy or unreliable. Then we need to record her, I said. Get her to admit what she's doing. Ray nodded. I can wear a wire. If I confront her, she might slip up. But it's risky. If she suspects anything, she'll shut down. What other choice do we have? I said, and I could hear the desperation in my own voice. He didn't have an answer. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. What if this didn't work? What if Melissa was smarter than both of us? What if I lost my son forever because of this? And then I thought about the baby. Was it even real? Or was that just another part of her con? I must have fallen asleep at some point because I woke up on the third day to the sound of Ray knocking on my bedroom door. "They're coming back early," he said, his voice tight. "I just got a text from Melissa. They'll be here tonight." My heart dropped into my stomach. We had hours. Maybe less. Ray and I spent the day setting up. He had a small recording device that he clipped to the inside of his cardigan. We tested it a dozen times to make sure it worked. I rehearsed what I would say if things went wrong, how I would protect him if Melissa tried to hurt him. Because by then, I was certain she was capable of anything. The sun was setting when we heard the car pull into the driveway. I stood in the kitchen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Ray was in the living room, sitting calmly in his chair, waiting. The front door opened, and I heard Trevor's voice, bright and happy. "Mom, we're home." I forced myself to walk into the entryway. Trevor was there, tanned and smiling, pulling a suitcase behind him. And behind him was Melissa, looking radiant in a white sundress, her hand resting on her stomach. "Mom," Trevor said, pulling me into a hug. "I'm so sorry we had to leave like that. Work emergency. You know how it is." I hugged him back, but I couldn't take my eyes off Melissa. She was watching me. And she was smiling. "Hi Barbara," she said sweetly. "Did you and Grandpa Ray have a good Christmas?" "It was fine," I said, my voice flat. Trevor didn't notice the tension. He was too busy talking about Hawaii, the beaches, the hotel. Melissa kept smiling, kept touching his arm, kept playing the perfect wife. And then Ray walked into the room. "Welcome back," he said quietly. Melissa's smile faltered. Just for a second. But I saw it. "Ray," she said, her voice a little too bright. "How are you feeling?" "Not great," he said. "I think we need to talk." Trevor frowned. "Talk about what?" "About your wife," Ray said, and the room went silent. Melissa's face didn't change, but her eyes went cold. "Trevor, honey," she said softly, "I think Ray's not feeling well. Maybe we should get him some rest." "I'm fine," Ray interrupted. "And I'm done lying for you." Trevor looked between them, confused. "What's going on?" And that's when Ray told him everything. He told him about Melissa's past, her previous marriages, the men she'd destroyed. He told him about the money she'd been stealing, the credit cards she'd opened, the man in Seattle. He told him about the USB drive, the photos, the emails. Trevor's face went pale. Melissa started to cry, shaking her head, saying it was all lies, that Ray was sick and confused, that he didn't know what he was talking about. But Trevor wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at me. "Did you know about this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. And I watched my son's heart break. 3 days later, Trevor showed up at my door with an envelope full of cash. I hadn't seen him since that night. After Ray finished talking, Trevor had asked Melissa to leave. She'd screamed, cried, threatened to call the police. But he'd stood firm, and eventually, she'd grabbed her purse and stormed out. Ray and I had stayed with Trevor until the early hours of the morning, going through the evidence, answering his questions, watching him come apart piece by piece. It was the worst night of my life. And now, standing on my porch in the cold January air, my son looked like a stranger. His eyes were hollow, his face pale and drawn. He'd aged 10 years in 3 days. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat in the living room, the same room where Ray had told me the truth on Christmas Eve. Trevor placed the envelope on the coffee table between us. "What's this?" I asked. $50,000, he said. "It's yours if you never speak about what happened again." I stared at him, my heart breaking all over again. "Trevor." "I mean it, Mom," he said, and his voice was hard. "I don't want to hear Melissa's name. I don't want to talk about the money, the baby, any of it. I just want to move on." "Move on?" I said, my voice rising. "Trevor, she almost destroyed you. You can't just pretend it didn't happen. I'm not pretending, he snapped. I'm surviving. Do you have any idea what it's like to find out your whole life was a lie? That the person you loved, the person you trusted, was just using you? I can't think about it. I can't talk about it. I need to forget. Tears were streaming down my face. And what about me? What about Ray? We saved you. I know, he said quietly. And I'm grateful. That's why I'm giving you the money. It's all I have left. Melissa cleaned me out before she left. My accounts are empty. My credit's ruined. I'm going to have to sell the house just to pay off the debts she left me with. Then keep the money, I said, pushing the envelope back toward him. You need it more than I do. No, he said, his voice breaking. I need you to take it. I need to know that we're okay, that you're okay, and that we never have to talk about this again. I looked at my son, at the man who used to climb into my lap when he was scared, who used to tell me everything, who used to trust me with his whole heart. And I realized I'd lost him. Not to Melissa, but to the shame and pain of what she'd done to him. I can't take this, I whispered. Please, he said, and his voice was so small, so broken. Please, Mom. Just let me move on. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him and tell him that forgetting wouldn't fix anything, that running away from the truth would only make it worse. But I didn't. Because I loved him. And sometimes, love means letting go. I took the envelope. Trevor left a few minutes later, and I sat alone in my living room, holding $50,000 I didn't want and crying for the son I'd lost. Ray passed away 2 weeks later. I was with him at the end, holding his hand in the hospice room, listening to him breathe. He'd done what he'd set out to do, he'd saved Trevor from Melissa. But the cost had been higher than either of us had imagined. Thank you, I whispered as his eyes closed for the last time. Thank you for telling me the truth. He squeezed my hand once, and then he was gone. I used the money Trevor gave me to pay for Ray's funeral. It felt like the right thing to do. He didn't have any family left, no one to mourn him except me. So I gave him a proper burial, with flowers and a headstone that read, Raymond Mitchell, Truth Teller. Trevor didn't come to the funeral. I haven't spoken to him since that day in my living room. He moved to another state, started over, cut off everyone who reminded him of Melissa and what she'd done. I get a text from him every few months. Just a quick I'm okay, hope you are too, but that's it. I tell myself he'll come back eventually, that time will heal the wounds and he'll realize he needs his mother. But I don't know if I believe it. The truth is, I gave up my son to save him. And that's a kind of loss you never really recover from. But here's what I learned from all of this, and I want you to hear this, wherever you are in the world, whatever you're going through. Sometimes, the people we love will choose the lie over the truth because the truth is too painful to bear. And when that happens, all you can do is stand in the truth yourself, even if it means standing alone. I don't regret what I did. I'd do it all over again, even knowing how it would end. Because Trevor is alive. He's free. He has a chance to rebuild. And maybe someday, he'll understand that I didn't destroy his life. I saved it. As for Melissa, I never heard from her again. I don't know where she is, what name she's using, or who she's hurting now. But I hope somehow, somewhere, she got what she deserved. And Ray was the bravest man I've ever known. He spent his final days fighting for a stranger's son, exposing the truth when no one else would. I think about him every day. I think about his pale blue eyes, his quiet voice, the way he looked at me on Christmas Eve and asked if I was ready to learn the truth. I wasn't ready. But I'm glad I did. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, or forced to choose between love and truth, I see you. You're not alone. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And check the description box below for more stories like mine. Stories about survival, revenge, and the things we do for the people we love. Because in the end, that's all we have. The truth. And each other. And sometimes, that has to be enough.